Shawn Howarth joins us right now, and he is the CEO of Excellon Resources. We'll be talking about his projects, Germany, US, and Mexico, and some of the biggest trends in the junior mining sector that investors need to be paying attention to right now. Shawn, welcome to Kitco. Welcome to the show.
David, thank you for having me. Great to be here.
I told you offline, you're the first project I've spoken to with an actual deposit in Germany. I mean, I've heard of other parts of Europe, Russia, of course, never Germany. I'm going to start with that. Why Germany?
Well, we're really excited about it. Saxony silver. It's a high-grade epithermal silver vein deposit in an area of eastern Germany that historically was a prolific silver mining and base metals mining jurisdiction. I think what stood out there when we first earned into a joint venture project on the asset was the land package that we amassed and the ability to intersect mineralization. We drilled 40 holes and drilled out 37 of the 40 intersected mineralization. And on the basis of the drilling that we completed over the last 2 years, looking at that as a highly prospective project that I'd categorize as early exploration.
Sorry, joint venture with whom?
We had joint ventured with a previous company that looked at that. We earned into the project over a 2-year period on exploration.
Okay. Now, you're well positioned to talk about jurisdiction because you're operating in 3 different continents. Well, technically, no. Mexico is the same continent as Idaho, but it's a bit further south. Very different, obviously, as a jurisdiction from the middle of the U.S. Give us an overview of some of the opportunities and different challenges operating in 3 different places around the world.
A great question, David. I think, just to provide the listeners, we have a portfolio of projects, past production in Mexico, epithermal gold development in Idaho through our Kilgore project, and of course in Germany as well. The focus historically has always been on production, generating cash flow, and putting that into exploration and feeding the exploration machine or the engine to continue to grow value, at our various projects. And that really was the genesis of Kilgore and the acquisition of the Otis Gold in 2020, and also the genesis of the joint venture project that we earned into for Saxony Silver. I think what's really exciting now is that we're transitioning. So we've wound down our Platosa mine in Mexico, but we're taking that workforce, and we just recently announced the acquisition of La Negra. La Negra is a polymetallic deposit in central Mexico. The transaction we'll talk about is an all-share transaction where each party that's in the transaction is bringing their respective value add into the deal. And I think from Excellon's perspective, we have the operating know-how and the experiences in Mexico to be successful with that project. And that's very exciting.
If an investor were to ask you, Shawn, why is it that you're spread thin around the world? I mean, why can't you just focus on one deposit at a time like some other juniors are? How would you respond to that?
Well, I think we like the diversified exposure to having multi-assets, provides multiple pieces of value within our portfolio. We like the diversified exposure to the commodities as well. We have precious metals. We are focusing in silver. I think the La Negra transaction is transformative for this company and really defines our strategy and our future, which is continued in Mexico, continued investment. And I think this is a theme that you see with a lot of what I'd characterize as junior to mid-tier miners right now, with recent transactions within Mexico and the growing trend to be successful within the operating jurisdiction where you have a specialty or an experience and know-how.
Okay, now tell us about the resources in each of these deposits. You already talked about the one in Germany, so let's move on to.
Kilgore.
Yeah. Please.
Kilgore is an advanced stage development project based in Idaho. Kilgore is a gold project, widely disseminated epithermal deposit. You've historically been drilling that for the last, I'd say, 5 years, 10 years, previously with Otis Gold, and which Excellon acquired in 2020. Since then, we started a 2,400 meter drill program, or 5,000 meter drill program this year, which we completed 2,400 meters of drilling, and announced some news on that. It's exciting. A lot of confirmation drilling. The purpose of this exploration program was to understand some of the higher grade mineralization in the structure, and also test out potential step out targets, of which a lot of those assays are still pending. La Negra, the recent acquisition that we announced on Monday, is a polymetallic deposit, so approximately 40% silver, 25 or 20% copper, 20% zinc, and the remaining being lead. The standout with this, and when we looked at this, we went to site probably in the middle of the summer, roughly, and qualified this as a priority asset for really 3 or 4 reasons. Number one being the near-term restart potential of this deposit. This is a past producing mine, produced successfully around 3 to 3.5 million ounces of silver equivalent annually over the last, I'd say, up to about 2015. The mine was put on care and maintenance in around 2020 during COVID, and the reason being to reset the deposit and understand where the future value is with the deposit following a 9,800 meter drill program. So the exploration within the asset and within the deposit is relatively unbound. We think there's significant potential both along strike near surface, but also at depth on much more skarn style, wider mineralization, and that's very exciting to us. And finally, the multi-commodity exposure to this, looking at this as a silver, but also critical minerals, so silver, copper, and zinc to that extent as well.
If I understand for Platosa, we're talking about Platosa right now. The silver is a byproduct of the lead and zinc that you mine, right?
So now I'm talking about La Negra. So
La
at
Negra,
Platosa,
okay.
I can get into that separately. So at La Negra, the silver reports to both the lead and the copper concentrates. So while it's a significant portion of value, it's recovered through those concentrates, correct?
Roughly, let's say of 1 ton of extraction, how much of that is silver versus other metals?
Roughly 40% would be silver of the payable metals that come from that mine.
Can you tell us a bit about the grade of the silver?
Yeah, so the grade is I would say is around 60 grams per ton silver. The throughput at La Negra is around 2,500 tons per ton. That's what's contemplated in the restart plan in the PEA. I think where we look at La Negra being a realistic restart is the fact that previous operators were managing this mine at 2,500 tons per day and were being successful with this. So when we look at the restart, it's very much a 12 to 18 month de-risking process. During that time, what we will focus on is the infill drilling to better understand where we want to restart the area specifically with the mineralization, and the detailed engineering that's required to ensure refurbishment of the plant and the overall success of a restart plan.
I'm curious as to why your resource growth projects are all brownfield, if I got it correctly, all brownfield projects and not greenfield. Is that a business decision that you've made?
Well, I think what we do is I would qualify Saxony Silver very much as a greenfield. It's a past producing, which is very exciting. Mm-hmm. I think it speaks to, there's the exploration potential, but you want that within the context of something that you believe can be restarted and that believe can become a mine one day. And it's the easiest place to look is at existing past producing assets, that's for sure.
And generally speaking, I presume it's less risky to restart a project was previously in production or had history of exploration than go out in the open and drill for something new, right?
Well, I would agree with that. I mean, that's a big thing with La Negra is that it is a fully permitted for restart production mine. And that's a critical component to this that you're looking at saying you're focusing on the qualities in the ground and where that money goes versus arranging permitting and changes.
All right. Well, let's talk about the La Negra mine acquisition. So press release came out, I believe, 2 days ago, the 9th of January. We're speaking today on the 11th. Just going to read the first sentence of this press release. Excellon Resources is pleased to announce that it has entered into a definitive acquisition agreement to acquire the permanent past-producing La Negra mine located in Querétaro State, Mexico, an entity owned by an investment fund manager by Orion Resource Partners for an aggregate consideration of US $50 million. Is this cash deal, shares deal? Tell us about this deal.
This is an all-share transaction. So there's a couple key components with this. $50 million is the total consideration, but $20 million right now. So there's 2 components. It's the partners that we're bringing Orion, but also M Grupo. M Grupo is a Querétaro-based infrastructure company. What they deliver is the experiences within the workforce, within the communities that can assure us that we'll be successful with the project. Orion is a long-term strategic capital provider and supporter of the company. And most importantly, what we're focusing on is an equal sharing on this. Everyone takes equity in the deal. So all new capital coming in is going to be invested in the ground and for the restart of the project.
Okay. And generally speaking, the $50 million, how is that valued?
Yeah, so what we've done is we've structured this. So $20 million in consideration upfront for the transaction today. And on completion of commercial production or on achievement of commercial production, two other contingent payments, $15 million on achievement of commercial production, and then additional $15 million 1 year after. So the way we look at this, it says a little bit of equity upfront with the ability to provide more value when we're successful with the project.
I see. Okay. So that way you're kind of hedging the risk a little bit here.
And we're balancing, the risk and the valuation of the asset. We're very comfortable with it. A PEA was completed on the asset in March of this year, preliminary economic assessment that outlined I'd say a NPV of 132 million US at long-term commodity price estimates of around $22 per ounce silver and reasonable copper and zinc prices as well.
Okay. Going forward, what are your long-term strategic objectives for the company at large?
So I'd say right now we kind of categorize as a 12 to 18 months, so a medium term and then also a long term. The medium term is be successful with the restart plan. So focusing on getting the detailed engineering completed to restart La Negra, focus on getting the infill drilling completed to qualify the resource and particularly in the first 3 years of production. And assess the mine plan and any opportunities to expand on that mine plan as required. Longer term, critical focus is continued exploration and continued mineral growth within the deposit itself. And I think there's two exciting areas. Near the top of the mine is the highly structured or structure controlled mineralization. As we go deeper, we see a transition towards more skarn style, wider zones of mineralization. And I think it's exciting to explore both a long strike and then at depth as well. Both remain open. Both are not structurally constrained.
Mm-hmm. All right. And are you looking into acquisition partners long term?
Well, we have Orion as a long-term strategic partner, and that's number one, and that's critical. I think what our focus is as a corporate strategy as well is to look at other opportunities within Mexico, continue to grow the portfolio where we can provide value. And what is that value for Excellon and for Excellon shareholders? It's really about the ability to de-risk a project, take a project from near production right in through production and the whole stage into cash flowing.
Do you have a corporate mandate to only mine silver and silver byproduct metals, or are you open to perhaps gold, other base metals, perhaps lithium? I know I'm just throwing out random. I don't mean to just throw out random names. I mean, I understand the processes for these metals are very, very different, but generally speaking, as a long-term growth strategy, are you open to other metals is my question.
We're open to everything. I think by nature of our diversified portfolio that includes precious metals and base, we're looking at all opportunities where we can be a management team that can deliver value. I'd say that our primary objective is qualifying within Mexico or within an area that we've operated and we have experience with. I think that's a strategic advantage for us. And so that qualifies some of the assets within certain jurisdictions. But we've looked abroad, and I'd say over the last 6 months to the last year plus, we've looked abroad for opportunities and willing to go where there's value.
When you look at developments with technology, with infrastructure, with the economy around the world, which base metals do you think will have the highest potential for demand growth over the next 10 years?
I think we look primarily at the energy transition metals, and I qualify silver as an energy transition metal as well. Silver's got the unique benefits of both a precious aspect, historically viewed as a precious, but also obviously as an industrial metal. And if you break out the various industrial uses of silver, photovoltaics, energy transition is by far the largest growing segment of that. So our focus definitely is in those areas.
Okay. Now, let's move on to the junior sector overall. As you know, gold space this year has been, it's performed better than other sectors. The gold price was relatively steady compared to stocks and cryptocurrencies. The senior gold miners slid as a result of the gold price. The juniors slid even more because of the higher beta. What's next for the sector is my question. Where is the capital? Is the capital rotating back into the sector? We're not yet. Are you seeing higher or lower acquisition activity? Are you seeing investor interest like we saw, in 2020? And if not, what's going to, multiple part question, but basically health of the sector. When's it coming back?
Yeah, let me start with corporate activities, David. I think that's a good place to start because what we've seen, particularly in Mexico and in our market, in Excellon's market, is there's been significant acquisition activity, focusing on restarts of historically brownfield assets, and I think that's very exciting. I think it speaks to two things. I think it speaks to a general view that there's a growing demand or growing interest, particularly in silver and base metals projects, but also the ability to invest into Mexico as a safe jurisdiction to put capital to work. And I think that for companies that are willing to be opportunistic, this is the right time to be capitalizing. And there was retrenchment at the end of last year. There's no doubt about that. The capital markets declined. There's no doubt about that. I think the growth that we see, the outlook that I see, is getting better. It's better than where it was a month ago. It's definitely better than where it was 2 months ago. And I think we're catching a good wave here.
One would imagine there's more acquisition interest when valuations are depressed, when everything's cheaper. Is that the case or not?
I think there is, and I think that the structure also speaks to that. The fact is that there's a lot of all-share transactions, and what that allows is sellers of assets also to benefit and participate in the upside potential in a revaluation of an asset itself. So while you don't see as many assets trading just straight for cash, liquidity is less of a priority. It's about finding the right management teams and the right partners on assets and future development.
Are you concerned about rising interest rates affecting your cash flow and income statement?
Well, I think rising interest rates, is basically a multi-level event across the indexes, across, the effect on commodities prices as well. Mm-hmm. I think that's always a concern. A key for us is as a miner, we can't control those things. What we can try to control is our costs and our budgeting, and be able to advance projects by putting capital in the ground and being able to focus less on the macro events and just maintain a liquidity to be able to do your job, and that's mining.
Well, do macro events affect your capital structure? How much debt versus equity you maintain in your balance sheet?
Yeah, I think they do. So a big thing for us is that Excellon had debentures or has debentures outstanding. It was 17.9 million in debentures on the company. As part of the transaction acquisition of Negra, we also restructured those debentures. So we early converted a portion, 25% of those, and the remaining 75% of the debentures, the maturity was extended out for four years, so to 2027. So the key there is being able to provide some flexibility as you continue to develop your asset portfolio.
Very good. Finally, let's move on to management. People want to learn more about management. Tell us about your personal background and your professional background leading up to Excellon.
Yeah, so my background is I'm an engineer by education. I've been in the mining industry now for about 20 years, primarily on the corporate, I would say also the corporate finance side. So previously investment banking, corporate finance, and moved into the corporate side probably about 3 or 4 years ago. And come from this much more from what I view as a capital markets angle. And what's important then is to have complementary skill sets around you, both in the geology exploration and also the mine operation side.
And I'm just curious how you transition from the corporate side into the management of the mining side. How did that happen?
Mining investment banking. So focusing previously with Standard Chartered Bank and worked on structuring foreign investment into Canada from Standard Chartered clients, both in Asia and India. Okay,
very good. And when you're looking for, people to work with, do you value, is it mostly engineers you work with, or is it corporate finance people, a combination of both? What's your kind of
I think you have to have a complementary skill set that covers both the legal framework, engineering, and corporate finance. I think it's important and have that equal representation also at the board level. Make sure that you cover all your bases as a responsible miner. Right. And notwithstanding, absolutely critical to this entire thing is ESG and having a strong ESG policy within the areas that you operate.
Yeah, let's spend a minute talking about that. I'm curious to learn more about how the ESG movement, if you want to call it that, is affecting the mining industry. How are you changing, I guess, your operations to comply with either regulations and or just social norms?
Well, we have a high reporting standard. We always have at Excellon. We report to higher standards than principally where we operate historically. I think it's critical to have the openness and the transparency. So it's not as much about changing your policies, but it's about having that transparency and that level of disclosure that it's critical for both investors, but also for the communities that you operate within.
Can you give us one or two examples of standards you have to meet?
Well, we meet Canadian standards when it comes to tailings and tailings management.
Okay.
There's either standards within the frameworks in the countries that you operate within, and then there's more global standards or industry standards that you try to achieve.
Are there carbon credits that you have to either buy or offset, or is that something you worry about?
With our business, that's not as much a factor
Okay.
in the mines that we operate. But
All right,
I mean, it's critical overall. There's no doubt, and there's always opportunity to review those things.
Great. All right. Well, Shawn, I appreciate your time and appreciate you coming on Kitco. Thank you.
David, thank you very much for having me.
Thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. I'm David Lin. Stay tuned for more.